bask in the glory. Every other weekend there's a cognac story. Before we give a toast, better make sure they pour me another glass and put it in the air for the time that passed. I said bask in the glory. Every other weekend there's a cognac story. Before we give a toast, better make sure they pour me another glass and put it in the air for the time we
girls, sippers, and connoisseurs alike. Welcome back to Cognac Stories. I would like to apologize for yesterday's episode. I had some audio issues, and although the content was high quality, the audio was just low quality. So I took that down today, and I'm recording a new episode right now. But if you got a chance to listen to it, I'm going to redo the episode so you can actually understand what I'm saying, as opposed to hearing that garbled mess that was going on. But the beauty of having your own podcast and doing everything yourself is that you can just take whatever, you can take it down whenever you want and redo it, put it back up, and no one knows. And I don't have like a huge listener base, like a big show yet, that would notice something like that anyway. Only a few people have listened to it. But appreciate the patience. And today got a whole new topic that piqued my interest. I still read the newspaper, still watch the news. I have a news feed, and a story piqued my interest. A story caught my eye, and I wanted to share it with you, and then share some thoughts with some other events that unfolded today as I was reading this news story. And I just wanted to share a stream of consciousness with you guys. You know, some of this is written down. So I have notes. So if it seems like I'm reading, that's because I'm reading my notes. I'm not reading news articles. I'm reading my notes that I wrote, because I had so many thoughts, and I wanted to make sure that they were organized. I didn't want to come in here just rambling about something as important as this topic. And right now, what I like to say is that we're in a war. And I'm not talking about the war on terror. I'm not talking about the war on drugs. I'm not talking about the war on obesity. I'm talking about the war on culture, the war on history. And we've seen politicians and talking heads and activists alike talk about history being whitewashed, and American values, and sanitizing history, things of that nature. That always concerns me. It always concerns me. It always drives me deep into thought. Because history is written by the person that has the most power. History is written by the victor. But with the beauty of history that we have now is that it's all recorded in a way that we can easily access the truth. So it's hard to keep the truth when we have access to free information, a near infinite amount. So we know when somebody's trying to pull a wool over our eyes, trying to pull a fast one, trying to bamboozle us. We know when somebody's trying to have a convenient retelling of history to keep themselves in a certain light, not to let the past be known. And this, like, history is one of my favorite subjects. Those who do not learn from it are doomed to repeat it. You've heard that a million times. And that is what it seems like we're trying to do as a country. We're trying to whitewash history. Men in Black hit you with the flash pen. If you watch Attack on Titan, we're trying to hit you with the Titan power, that brain that makes everybody forget memories. This is a live whitewashing of history in progress. And I'll get to what happened. I don't want to keep pushing this story without telling you what's happened and giving you my thoughts, and giving you all these tantalizing teasers. I'm gonna just get to the shits right now. I'm gonna try to keep profanity at a minimum so my mom can listen. I love you, Mom. But Father's Day is coming up. Shout out to my dad. Can I get that video at some point? All right. I'm looking directly at you, making eye contact. I know it's weird. Men don't do that, but yo, I need that video. So anyway, Florida teacher suits school over Black Lives Matter retaliation. That was the headline. Florida teacher suit school over Black Lives Matter retaliation. So when I saw that, immediately I thought that, this is a white teacher who may have said something wild about Black Lives Matter or said they're terrorists or run over protesters. I'm thinking, based on that headline, I'm thinking that the teacher is suing the school over the school punishing her for saying something against Black Lives Matter. And then when I read the article, it threw me for a loop. And I'm going to share it with you because it's impossible. It's not impossible. It's very probable. It's it's just amazing how people are so oblivious to the war that's going on with the truth right now under our own noses. But last fall, a white high school teacher named Amy D'Onofrio decided to hang up a Black Lives Matter flag outside of her classroom at Robert E. Lee High School in Jacksonville, Florida. Her school is made up of 75% Black students. This is in Duval County, Florida. So you would assume that this wouldn't be a problem. She taught at that school for the past 9 years and even had a program that she started at the school called EVAC. EVAC is cave backwards. EVAC references Plato's allegory of the cave, a story of prisoners chained in a cave since birth until a liberator enters to unbind their chains and lead them to the light, tasking them with the responsibility to return to liberate others. EVAC was a youth led movement based in Jacksonville, Florida. It began when Black youth in a high school leadership class realized their shared experiences with violence, racism, loss, and the justice system and desired change. They began their efforts by inviting police officers to class for youth led discussions. And in just over 1 year, with no formal funding, the so called at risk youth redefined themselves as at hope leaders who met with President Obama, testified on Capitol Hill, made the front page of the New York Times, and won first place nationwide in a concert sponsored by Harvard. They've gone on to present at the Department of Justice, the White House, and 4 times at Harvard University. So now that you have some backstory on Mr. D'Onofrio, you see that this isn't some Jenny come lately or virtue signaling social justice warrior. This was someone that was an active and effective ally. There's a white woman teaching in a Black school named after a Confederate general who is also fighting to keep their name. And she's fighting for racial equality and equity at the school. Hey, man, this stuff writes itself, bro. And despite the course's success, the school is accused of allegedly canceling the class and then eventually making it a after school activity, citing budget cuts. And then the complaint also alleges that her students experienced racial discrimination, harassment, and retaliation over the years at the hands of the school district from being a part of that program. And now you're probably thinking like, well, how is that even possible? How is that possible? Or why does it even matter? And the reason why things like this catch my attention is because this is what we mean when we talk about systemic racism and institutional racism. I mean, is the tragic irony not clearly visible here? A high school in a Black neighborhood in a Black county has administrators who have an issue with the Black Lives Matter flag. And the school recently made the news for some of the views of the community members who argued against changing the school's name. This is why it's so important that we as a community be involved in our children's educations and participate in school board meetings. All of the most vocal people at these meetings and people arguing against the name change were people who did not represent the community. 75% Black, and these are all white folks. Nor did they have children that were actively students in the school at the time. You see how dangerous it is when we neglect our kids in that way? We allow others to make those choices for us. And see, her story isn't unique. What's happening is that we are witnessing a war. You know, renowned American poet Albert Johnson, aka Prodigy, said, "There is a war going on outside. No man is safe from. You can run, but you can't hide." That is what's going on right now. There is a war going on outside. No man is safe from. You can run, but you cannot hide. And that war is a culture war. That war is a culture war. Right now, you are seeing politicians publicly fight against a mysterious enemy known as critical race theory. And you may be asking yourself, what is critical race theory? What is critical race theory? You hear that buzzword all the time. You hear it everywhere. I'm going to break down what it is. Critical race theory is an academic movement of civil rights scholars and activists in the United States who seek to critically examine the law as it intersects with issues of race and to challenge mainstream liberal approaches to racial justice. It's the theory analyzing the role of law in the maintenance of white supremacy. It's the theory of analyzing the role of law in the maintenance of white supremacy. If you type this phrase in your search engine of choice, you will see numerous elected officials writing bills and attempting to pass laws that limit what school teachers can teach because critical race theory analyzes the effects of race influencing law and policy over the course of history. The beauty of recording history is that you can analyze it and learn from previous generations so that you don't make the same mistakes. This is clearly an attempt to further whitewash and sanitize history to portray white people in the best possible light. And just to clarify, when I say white people, I want you to understand I'm not talking about regular Americans who happen to be Caucasians. I'm talking about people who actively participate in the system of white supremacy. You may not even know how to tell these two sets of people apart, but that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. And it's very simple. Can you say that Black Lives Matter without having to say that all lives matter or blue lives matter as well? Do you think that the United States Constitution was a document written by white men and for white men and only white men in America? Do you have black friends that you are not co-workers with, and have you ever been to their homes, and have you met their families? Do you think that police departments need oversight and reform? Do you think that undocumented migrants have rights? Do you believe in the existence of systemic racism and oppression in America, and that it has been applied towards all minority groups in America? If you have answered no to any of these questions, then congratulations, you are white and you are probably racist. If you answered no to any of those questions, then you are white and you are racist. This is the part where you hit the rewind button and you read and you listen to those questions again. And if you answer no to any of those questions, you are white and you are racist. You may say things like you're colorblind or that you don't see race. You're a racist. You may say things like I have black friends, yet all of your black friends are the same three people as your white friends. So if you and your white friends all share the same black friends, you don't have black friends. You just know black people. What critical race theory does is shed light on situations where there was intentional darkness. When you look at the education and wealth gap in America by race, you will see a large difference between white people and all people of color. This is because all people of color had education and equity denied to them by the law. Before Brown versus the Board of Education, there was Mendez versus Westminster in California. Thurgood Marshall tried that case prior to Brown versus the Board of Education, and that is what set the legal precedent for school integration. The Hispanics dealt with the same issues that we did. The Asian community had the same anti race mixing laws as the blacks had. All of us were siphoned into public housing ghettos in the cities and then denied access to home loans through redlining. I mean, it's funny because everyone loves to go to Chinatown or Little Tokyo. We love going to Koreatown. Those places exist because those were the only places that they were allowed to live. Those cleaning business and restaurants were all that they were allowed to legally own and operate. That was by law. That was written into American law. It sounds really familiar to the other brown folks and immigrants right now. Critical race theory debunks myths like George Washington having wooden teeth, and it exposes the truth of him having teeth pulled from slaves. Critical race theory is how we dissect the effects of the 1994 crime bill and what it did to the urban community. It looks at the effects of the war on drugs and the branding of black on black crime and how that has damaged the perception of the black man as a threat. I can go on and on about this, but I digress. The old guard, the keepers of the status quo, the protectors of persecution, they have worked tirelessly. They have worked endlessly to rob you of your unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The only difference now is that they aren't hiding behind hooded robes anymore. They are publicly rallying, wearing Make America Great Again merch, and flying Blue Lives Matter flags. Yes, if you fly a Blue Lives Matter flag, you are a racist. And if you're asking why, it's because Blue Lives Matter was created as a response to Black Lives Matter. Being a blue life is a choice, being a black life is a birthright. The end. Right? It's wild, right? Because as I was writing this down, another thing came through my news feed. Texas Governor Greg Abbott just signed into law a bill that prevents this such idea from being taught in school. And now this is from Governor Greg Abbott's Twitter. To keep Texas the best state in the nation, we can never forget why our state is so exceptional. I signed a law establishing the 1836 Project, which promotes patriotic education and ensures future generations understand Texas values. Together, we'll keep our rich history alive. That was from the desk of Governor Greg Abbott, signing into law a bill that prevents the teaching of critical race theory and establishes a Texas sized history class, I guess. I don't know. So let me educate you guys about some facts about Texas and Texas values. Section 9 of the General Provisions of the Constitution of the Republic of Texas, ratified in 1836, made slavery legal again in Texas. It also defined the status of black slaves and determined people of color who were servants for life under Mexican law would be property. Texas was the only state to secede twice in order to protect the American institution of slavery. They did so in 1836 because the Mexican government outlawed slavery, And then they did it again in 1861 when the United States did the same thing. In the Texas Declaration of Clauses, they clearly stated why they left the Union. And now I'm going to read exactly from the Texas Declaration of Clauses, written February 2nd, 1861. It states, we hold as undeniable truths that the government of the various states and of the Confederacy itself were established exclusively by the white race for themselves and their posterity, that the African race had no agency in their establishment, that they were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior and dependent race. And in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable, that in this free government all white men are and of right out to be entitled to equal civil and political rights, that the servitude of the African race as existing in these states is mutually beneficial to both bond and free, and is abundantly authorized and justified by the experience of mankind and the revealed will of the Almighty Creator as recognized by all Christian nations, while the destruction of the existing relations between the two races, as advocated to our sectional enemies, would bring inevitable calamities upon both and desolation upon the 15 slave-holding states. Now, I'm not a PhD or a history professor, but it seems very clear that Texas was established as a white supremacist and slavery safe haven, and Governor Greg Abbott is doing his due diligence to continue that Texas tradition. Now, this is just another attempt at the whitewashing of history. And it's funny, man, because it's like white folks for years have been complaining about diversity months for people of color and the lack of a white history month. And y'all whitewash history already. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo whitewashed all the history already in teaching in school, so that does not apply. Texas already teaches its own version of history as well. They say everything's bigger in Texas, and so is the racism. People that know me know that I hate Texas. This has nothing to do with the individual people. It has to do with the state's history. It's a white supremacist safe haven, and they already teach their own version of history. They have a national reputation for controversial curriculum standards. This is called the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. The Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or the TEX. They have a test called the TEX. They've been criticized for listing Moses. That's right, from the Bible. They listed Moses as one of the founding fathers, and they downplayed slavery as a cause of the Civil War. Even though the Texas Constitution of 1836 and their succession articles clearly state that the lack of slavery in Mexico and the United States is why they chose to secede both times. They said it was states' rights, a state's right to have slavery. What's actually being published in textbooks has also been called racist. In 2015, a textbook published for Texas students called Slaves Workers and described the Atlantic slave trade alongside immigration patterns. The publisher, McGraw Hill Education, cited it an editing error. Ronnie Dean Buren, who teaches at the University of Houston and whose son caught the error, called it an attempt to erase the hard writing that is slavery that is had on the paper of our society. I think she meant an attempt to erase the handwriting that slavery has had on the paper of our society. Some more interesting facts about Texas. They were the last state to abolish slavery after the Civil War due to wanting reparations for slave owners, hence why many blacks celebrate Juneteenth. The Texas Rangers, they were famous for many things. However, one thing that most people don't know is that between the years of 1914 and 1919, the Texas Rangers and special appointed deputies by the Texas governors killed over 5,000 Mexicans without due legal process, and faced no punishment. Governor R. Allen Shivers, who opposed the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, went so far as to call out the Texas Rangers at Mansfield High School in 1956 to prevent black students from entering the public school. So that's right, the racist Rangers got called out to keep black kids from integrating schools in 1956. All right, this is not something that happened 100 years ago. This happened in your parents' lifetime. Texas had whites only primary elections for political parties until the Supreme Court overturned this practice in 1944. So, white only primaries, blacks were not allowed to put themselves in the primaries. And they also had the voter disenfranchisement, the voter suppression that made it damn near impossible or deadly for blacks to vote. There are currently 55 registered hate groups in Texas. When you're a hate group, you register for nonprofit status, so you have to pay taxes. 55 of these registered hate groups in Texas, making it the third highest in the nation. From the 1880s to the 1930s, there were 349 known lynchings, the third highest in the nation behind Georgia and Mississippi. In the 1920s, one out of every three eligible men in Dallas were documented members of the KKK. I didn't misspeak. One out of three eligible men in Dallas were documented members of the KKK. 33% of eligible men were members of the KKK in Dallas in the 1920s. Also, in the 20s, this is known because they kept rosters of this. In the 1920s, the Texas State Fair was regularly used by the KKK to recruit and initiate new members. In 1923, they held the largest Klan rally and mass initiation that had ever been seen at the time in front of an inflated crowd of 160,000 fairgoers that were bolstered by scores of racists, bigots, Klansmen, Nazis that were attending. That day, they initiated 800 women and 5,631 men into the ranks of the Klan that day. The fair itself wasn't integrated until 1961. So, up until 1961, you couldn't even go to this fair unless you were white. And that's the Texas State Fair. According to the census of 1860, the total population of Texas was counted at 600,000, uh, 600,000 plus or minus 2,000. And 30% of that were slaves, totaling 180,682 enslaved people. So 30% of the population in Texas at the start of the Civil War, 30% were slaves. And oh, hey, Texas also banned interracial marriage in 1836, or I'm sorry, 1837, a year after they seceded from Mexico and became a state. So they're not racist, but they banned interracial marriage, and that remained until 1967 with the case of Loving versus Virginia that overturned all anti-miscegenation laws. And that's Governor Greg Abbott in Texas. He wants to ban critical race theory from analyzing Texas's history of racism so they can teach a patriotic perspective that paints them in the proper light. Illuminati got my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society trying to keep their eye on me. Prodigy told y'all a long time ago there's a war going on outside. No man is safe from. You can run, but you can't hide. And that's just my stream of consciousness for the day. Just what I was thinking. I'll get back to the other episode. I'll re-record that because You guys deserve better. And it was great content. And I really want to get that conversation going. But appreciate you guys' time lending me your ear. I was reading notes, notes that I took on this subject. So if it sounds like I was reading, that's because I was reading. Reading is fundamental, and I'm an excellent reader. I was one of those guys that stood up in front of the class and read. I remember one time, though, man, in his railroad class, I was reading the word island, and I kept saying it was island. And then my boy Mark Goddard corrected me. He was like, "It's island, nigga. You don't know how to read." I had never seen that word before ever until that day. After that, I knew it was pronounced island. But yeah, that's just my thoughts, man. It's a culture war going on. People passing bills to make it harder to vote, voter suppression, mimicking what happened after emancipation, and during Reconstruction. But I'm getting out of here, man. I don't know what how long we've gone. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully it inspires you to see what's going on in your own state, in your own kids' textbooks. But I'm out of here. Fuck being woke. Should have never been asleep. Peace.